Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Front Door. I'm Scott Benedict. You know, the tactics that successful consumer brands use to drive sales at retail, whether on store shelves or through online sales, have evolved in pretty profound and significant ways in the last few years. Significant focus has shifted from traditional media tactics such as print media or coupons or broadcast radio or television to predominantly a digitally based approach across platforms such as email, social media, search, digital display, and retail media in a more broad context. Now, some of the challenges that those brands face is not only the mastery of new forms of marketing activity, but whether they need to create centers of excellence within their organization or leverage the expertise of outside agencies to deliver the business results that they and their retail partners expect. Now, one of the firms that is leading the effort to help consumer brands market themselves more effectively is called BirdDog, a commerce media agency that helps brands win on retail marketplaces from Amazon to Walmart. Based in Atlanta, and BirdDog's founder and CEO, Shaun Brown, is visiting Northwest Arkansas this week, and he joins us in the studio. And Shaun, welcome to Northwest Arkansas and to the program. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I was expecting a big clap audience here.
Well, our studio audience wasn't available today. But
thank you.
We're thrilled. We're very excited to have you here.
We're thrilled to be in town, that we can make this happen as we meet with clients in Walmart and everybody else.
Awesome. Well, I think the first thing that occurred to me when I was reading a little bit about BirdDog is the inspiration for the founding of the company. Mm-hmm. And usually when someone founds a company like this, there's an unmet need that you or your team wanted to address in the market, and that kind of led you to start the company. Is that what caused you to start BirdDog?
Absolutely. Well, it's really twofold. There were pain points and unmet needs.
Right.
So I think let's back up a little in time to understand the market, and then I'll talk about how we need to fill some gaps there.
Okay.
When we look at, so my background in history, I did 20 plus years in the big holdco agencies working with global CPGs. And then I went to work in private equity with a performance media independent agency there. And those are two different worlds, right? Those big giant agencies are really good about talking about audiences and brands and data, and because they've been doing it for decades, because we're doing brand media.
Right.
And that's where this world is now, about trying to understand audiences. Meanwhile, these performance agencies who grew up from Amazon and from like 10 years ago, who know those channels really, really well, have done a great job there. But this new world with audiences coming forward with 1P data, with what the retailers are giving us now, is new territory for them, which they don't understand. They understand how to optimize the channel. They're evolving. The holdcos are evolving. They're making acquisitions. But like in the middle is this pain point where the new world is. And so that led us to say, we believe there is a need for an audience-first approach to retail media.
Gotcha.
And what drives that is the fact that we have access to 1P data now. What also is a big driving factor of that is now to do all that, to work with those platforms, you have to have technology, you got to have data, you got to have AI. And for a lot of companies, that's incredibly overwhelming. And up until 5 years ago, even 4 years ago, if you wanted to do that, you had to go build your own tech. You'd had to have developers and engineers and code. And so then you have to ask yourself, am I a tech and data company, or am I a CPG? Am I an agency? What are we?
Right.
And then, because that diverse focus. But now there's enough great tech that's off the shelf. So it's great SaaS that we can be able to offer clients. And so that we felt like we need to be able, but the problem is a lot of these brands out there didn't know where to turn, didn't know what tech should I use? How do I get there? Even if I get it, how do I manage it? And so we wanted to say, we're going to democratize the data, tech, and AI to make it accessible to brands of any size.
Okay.
And then the third piece that falls into this about where is that gap in the marketplace? Most of that tech and most of the companies, most of the focus is on these giant enterprise clients. So here in Bentonville and Rogers, like I'm driving by, I see every big logo on buildings here you can imagine.
Yes.
But reality is there are thousands upon thousands of SMBs and mid-markets who don't have access to that tech, who don't have the hands-on keys. They don't have the budget to do that.
Right.
And we wanted to focus on those brands. Before we launched, we vetted all this idea with Amazon first because they're a big player in this, and they agreed with us. I actually had lunch today with William White, CMO of Walmart, and because we're old friends from our days at Coke, and he validated the same thing. They have a long tail, particularly in the marketplace, of SMBs who just don't have access.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to solve. And that's why we call it BirdDog. So we've got those audiences. We find and fetch the audiences that matter most. And then we believe every dog has its day, and so should every brand. And that's how we give them data, tech, and AI to compete with a brand of any size.
That's so neat. It's interesting. I was going to ask you about the genesis of the name, and you kind of addressed it there. But it is so interesting to see that as retailing has evolved and as marketplaces have come online, that small businesses are certainly marketplaces are one of their key paths. And it just occurred to me as you were talking that no one is necessarily focused on them the way that you all are. And it feels like that's kind of filling an opportunity that was out there to help people not named Coca-Cola or Procter & Gamble. They have a lot of choices and can make investments they need, but SMBs don't really have those choices.
They don't know where to turn. It's overwhelming. So I'm guessing you may have been in this business as long as I've been, that we've ridden this evolution of change, which has been amazing.
Yeah.
Right? That we've gone from trade and channel to customer to shopper to omni to where we are today. But that's, if you want to be in this business today, like it is daunting.
Yeah.
You have to know so much.
Yeah.
And you have to be evolved with time. And a lot of what's being asked of marketers, particularly who work on these customer teams, hey, I need you to shift from focusing how to win in store and how to win shelf and how to get displays and how to get merchandising to, I need you to be a data and tech guy. A lot of people will learn new tricks, but you're asking a lot, especially when it's incredibly complicated to operate. And you have to be able, in many instances, understand how to code or to do SQL queries. And we'll talk about that with where 1P data is, but it's a pretty big task today.
It seems like it, and you kind of touched on this, but I want to dive maybe a little bit deeper. At a high level, it feels like some of the biggest challenges that brands, regardless of size, are facing is either at a corporate level, looking across the market, or with teams that they've assembled to work with specific retailers like Amazon and Walmart. Feels like there's probably a number of challenges. What's the biggest challenge in your mind that these companies are facing that you want to really help them deal with?
Well, my answer 2 weeks ago before tariffs would have been very different.
Indeed.
But it still comes back to the same thing. It's money, budget. Where do you want to focus? Where does your next best dollar go to get the result you're looking for?
Right.
And so what a lot of these companies now are, I'll tell you a story. When 10 years ago, I was working with Coca-Cola as a client, and my client at the time was trying to figure out how do we connect all this data we've got, and they were calling it the connected network experience.
Right.
Couldn't work because there's just too many different platforms, and there's too much data, and there wasn't the systems that exist today. So if you tried that effort today, it would have been very easy or easier. At that time, it didn't. And so now that's someone who has billions of dollars to spend.
Right.
So now let's focus on somebody who's mid-market or down who doesn't have that to spend. How do you figure out where to focus? How do you determine what data and tech, where do I want to invest in? Do I want to insource it, outsource it? Do I want to contract it? Do I just want to buy? It gets into also where is your focus as a company of who you are.
Right.
And what I always tell companies, let's not get distracted with something you don't do. Right. And that's where there's a lot of experts out here who can help guide, help get you there. Because the name of this game is now we're in an arms race. It's a speed game. Who can get to the finish line fastest?
Right.
And that's our role, is to help you get to there and compete with the fastest way we can. And so then when we talk about tech and tools to understand, there's 1P data. Do you want to own it? Do you have it? Many don't.
Right.
And if you are, where are you housing it? How are you integrating that with clean rooms of retailers? How are you creating algorithms around media mix modeling or multi-touch attribution? to understand what works, what doesn't, where should you spend, and how we do predictive analytics. And MMM is a big, big thing we focus on.
Right.
That we think we want to bring that to the world of SMBs who don't understand that. It's not just about spending media.
Right.
It's about where should you spend, on site or off site? Should you spend by which retailer? Which will get you, what's the cost of a share point with the dollars you spend? So each question just keeps digging in. It's like peeling an onion. There's 1,000 more, and it's incredibly overwhelming when you ask a customer team who's based here in the Bentonville area to say, I got a team of who've been category managers or some analytics looking at shelf data, and now to say, now I need you to analyze this. It's a completely different mindset.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
I would imagine. One thing I hadn't planned to ask you, but it occurred to me as you were talking, when you look at retailers outside of Walmart and Sam's Club, do most of them have this 1P data where both in-store purchase behavior and online purchase behavior are connected in a way that a marketer can then use it to design campaigns, or are other retailers still segmenting that data and have not yet brought together in your view?
Everybody's lagging and very far behind.
That's why I thought, and I wanted to hear your thoughts. So, yeah.
So the leader right now is Amazon, because they've just been doing this longer and they're ahead of the curve. So they're Amazon Marketing Cloud. Now, what those typically are signals about purchase behavior.
Right.
So we can understand who's bought a category, who's bought it, who's a lapsed user, and we can start to do retargeting there.
All right.
Scintilla, formerly Lemonade, with Walmart, is fast on their heels. And look, I think they have brought in a lot of folks from Amazon who are kind of coming in to say, here's what we did wrong there. We're going to build it right here.
Right.
And so they're learning. They've gone a lot faster.
Yeah.
And they're making a slightly better product as they go. You've got 8451 and dunnhumby helping with some of the other retailers, but it is not connected in the way to media that you want it to be like these others are.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the merchant in me hates that because of the fact that it feels like a foundational piece to setting up all the other value unlock is that you all have a single view of the customer regardless of how they interact with you. And that kind of leads me to the question I was going to ask you next, which is one of the interesting elements about modern digital marketing is ability to target perhaps more effectively than marketers have ever been able to do in the past, and really identify audience segments that are more likely to buy a given product at a specific retailer on a given day. How do you as a marketer kind of help your client brands identify those segments and then try to take advantage of that and market to them most effectively?
Yeah. So a handful of things to talk about here. So things have changed in the last couple of years. There was a lot of push in the market to get to probabilistic data because cookies were going away.
Right.
Meanwhile, while that's going on, all of us who've been doing shopper marketing or CPG for decades have been chasing the holy grail of how do I get the transaction data?
Yeah.
Right? And you used to have to buy it. You could get Nielsen, and that's sample size. It's not full-on data. Now we have a place where we actually have it.
Right.
And we can connect it. And so that is the holy grail has finally been put in front of us to go make this happen, right? But now you have to understand, how do I use it? How do I integrate with that, right? And so that gets into, like we were talking about, AMC and Scintilla. But to do that, it's not just a dashboard you turn on. You have to put in queries. You have to write SQL code. So if you don't have that on your team today, you don't have to. There are partners we use and you could go directly to that will help do that. And they have pre-built things to allow you to do that on Amazon today. It doesn't exist yet for Walmart. So it's fast coming, but it's coming soon. But I'd also argue or suggest that that data is a piece of the puzzle, right? Now, if you're on the Walmart team, then that's all the puzzle you care about, right? The reality is when you look at a brand, when they say, each retailer say, well, I have your audiences. Well, no, you have my audiences that are within your store, which is a piece of the pie. In that pie, we need to look at the total pie. And so each retailer, and some of those overlap and some of those don't. So those are some unique audiences. So we have to bring all those together into a unified view and pull those to understand all those audiences. Now, that's from the retailer. You should also own your own audience data. You should have your own 1P data, whether it's from CRM or however you're capturing that. Plus, there are all these third-party platforms where we get data from DSP, and what's important there on all of these is to understand of those audiences, I don't care about size. I care about value.
Right.
Meaning, which ones have lifetime value to me? Who are the right audiences to go after? Who has a propensity to purchase? Who is showing me intent signals via signals off-site that I can leverage to target on-site?
Right.
Right. And so it's getting more complicated. You're having to pull. It's not as simple as like, well, I now have the data with Walmart, and I'm going to do that. As a start, if you're just starting, absolutely do that. Right. If you're more advanced, and you're saying, because what happens is I'm looking for an audience, and you are capped. You can only do so much with that. How do I find more audiences?
Yeah.
And we look at each channel as an audience. Search on Walmart as a channel, DSP as a channel. Each of those represent an audience. And then we look off-site. And there's different platforms there, and each of those represent a revenue and a volume number that we can go tap into to drive traffic to get conversion.
And I was smiling as you're talking about that, because of the fact that different stops throughout my career, particularly in the early days of e-commerce, the drive was always, it felt like, for the volume of visitors, the volume of audience, instead of the quality or the relevancy of office, and the number of arguments on that that I had with various stakeholders when I was in an e-commerce role or when I was in a merchandising role was interesting. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, wow, we have come a long way in that, and kind of understanding that sheer size of an audience doesn't help you unless it is the right audience with a higher propensity to talk. And if you've garnered all the benefit out of the signals that a customer is telling you about what their interest or their intent is, right?
So think of it this way, the game has changed. So back in the day, like when we talk about distribution and getting into number of stores and your ACV,
Yes.
right? And you're filling the pipeline.
Yeah.
And so while you're filling that pipeline, numbers are great, right? There's volume to be had.
Right.
But now it's the same thing in e-commerce, and there's a lot more players now. You're now competing with a lot more people buying media. So now it's not as easy of just saying, I turn on media and it's there.
Right.
Now you're competing. There's a lot more people doing sponsored products and sponsored brands.
Yeah.
So it's not as easy as just, you need to be there. That is still, by the way, like 75% of all media spend is still on sponsored products and brands, right?
Right.
Demand capture. Let's get the people who are coming to the category to buy. But there's a ceiling. And what we typically see, a lot of brands get frustrated with agencies. What happens is they come in the first 4 to 6 months, and things are good. They look at the ROAS. ROAS is better. But then you cap out. Because now if I do a really good job, we've optimized what we can do on the platform with the audiences are coming there. And then what do?
Right.
Then you're like, you plateau, and you're like, your costs go down, your sales plateau, and you get frustrated. Why aren't I growing? Because I've maximized that audience. Right. So now we got to look at where are all these other audiences that we can begin to, but we would say start with the basics right there.
So I want to ask you very quickly, do you, if you're a marketer, kind of prepare the client for that ahead of time to say, this is what is going to happen, so don't be shocked when it does? Or do you invariably have to let them kind of see events unfold for themselves to see how they're getting that ROAS and getting that return on their marketing spend?
Yeah, we always talk to clients about a roadmap.
Okay.
Right. So we think in stages and gates. Okay, let's get this part right. Once we have this and we start to see the numbers perform the way they should, then let's open up the next gate. Right. And what are the next tool to find the next audience? And we don't just fully turn it on, because every brand and every category behaves differently.
Right.
And so let's say let's turn on affiliates and influencers to drive traffic. Well, one category, like beauty, is going to behave very differently than toys. Right. And so it's not all equal. So we really highly advise, unless we know the category, beauty will do well with affiliate. Right. But let's pilot, let's test and learn. Let's put some dollars in and see what happens with low risk. If it works, double down until we can't double down anymore.
Gotcha. That seems like so logical and right directed, but I'm confident that you have to have that discussion with clients.
Yeah,
All the time.
all the time. Everybody wants the sexy new thing. They want to go to, I saw these new live shopping. Let's do that. Well, you haven't even mastered over here. Let's make sure we do that well before we start playing with all these other toys.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the digital shelves and product detail pages specifically, because from my background as an online merchant as well as a merchant in a more traditional sense, it feels like one of the more foundational elements of success for a brand and for a retailer is the place where a purchase decision ultimately gets made, and buy button resides, which is on that product detail page. What kind of optimization do you and your team recommend to your brand clients in terms of the investment in that ultimate destination, the product detail page?
So I held off. I knew this question was coming, so I held off on the last one because we talked about that roadmap. This is number one, period. Like, so first off, before we talk about the details, what's important about it is there's a symbiotic relationship between your PDP or brand store and your media. Let's make sure that you are performing well with your PDP before we ever spend $1 on media.
Okay.
We want to make sure you can have a high converting page. Otherwise, we're wasting money.
Well, I'm so excited to hear you say that because so many people think the other way. They drive a bunch of audience to the page, and if the page doesn't convert, then
they blame the media for not performing, and then you've created your own problem.
Right.
Look, and on top of that, why wouldn't you want to make sure you can get the most free conversions through organic growth and showing up at the top of the page because you have your page built right with the right content, and then when people land there, you have the right content to convert. So when we talk about it, again, start with the basics.
Yes.
The headlines, your bullets, and your A+ content, and your visuals.
Right.
Top. So think top third of the page. We got to get that right. And video is more and more becoming more important about getting that right. Now, a lot of brands say, well, especially small brands, I don't have the budget to do it. Well, amazingly now, there's so much AI that you can get stuff done for free. And, Walmart's not there yet. Amazon does a lot of it for free.
Yeah.
And but there's also a lot of providers out there that you can get something created. It's not going to be the thing you're going to be framing and getting an award for.
Right.
But you've got to be better than some of the basics on there and understand what shoppers are looking for and the kind of content to help them convert. Then we start moving down the page and we're looking at your A+ content, right? And so now this is the romance copy, a lot more detail, a lot more of the specs, a lot more video. We can load up here. Right. And we want to make sure we are, because this is also a place where when we start driving traffic from outside, this is where our landing.
Right.
Is everything there to convert what you need to? Oh, and something else I left down a huge way, reviews.
I was going to ask you about that because I'm passionate about user-generated content broadly and ratings and reviews specifically. So tell me where your thoughts are there.
Well, first off, there are platforms for both Walmart and Amazon where you can work with them to help get verified reviews. You have to get verified reviews, particularly Amazon.
Yeah.
With Walmart, you can use some outside parties to generate and you're going to have them, influencers or users, go purchase your product and then write a real review. And when you're paying for that, but it impacts the algorithm if the reviews aren't there.
Right.
So everything is factored in there. And if your reviews aren't to scale, it's volume as well as quality.
Yes.
4 stars is not going to do you great as much as 500 4 stars.
Right.
Right. So let's make sure we get the reviews there to help drive because also we know 80% of shoppers will change their purchase decision based on a bad review. Right. If the reviews aren't right. So you should also be taking that into context of what are our shoppers telling us? Right. Should I be changing something about my product? Or is there a dissonance between the visuals and the copy than what the product actually is? And that's where most bad reviews come from, that dissonance, that, this isn't what I thought I was getting, or the size or the shape or whatever the issue is. So you need to be actively listening to those reviews.
I'm so excited to hear you say that because I've advocated for that at various stops throughout my own career, and it resulted in far more arguments than I really thought it would. So I love it when someone with your background kind of confirms the theory of that.
Yeah, think of like in the traditional retail store, right? So digital store is no different than the physical store. Create awareness. We're getting on the perimeter of the store as you're coming in. I got my end caps where I'm trying to create some sponsored brand or video to get you in. And then the shelf itself, where I'm closing the deal, right? And so, and what do I have there? So like all the years I've worked on tons of CPGs globally, and it's always that call to action. And so is your call to action right on your PEP?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's just as important as packaging is in physical retail, and we could have a whole nother episode.
Yeah, there's a whole episode just on this. Yeah,
exactly. Let me kind of shift the conversation to analytics and reporting, and it feels like that's some of the elements of retail that are taking greater importance in any role, particularly for brand marketers, and the amount of data available to leaders in different parts of a retail organization is greater than ever. My question for you, given your background, is what kind of analysis do you view as the most critical for success for a brand, not only for themselves in their own context, but in their partnership with their retail partners? Where should their greatest focus be?
All right, this is where I want to lose your listeners.
Well, they've been warned. They've been warned.
I don't care about ROAS, tacos, ACOS, share of voice. They're KPIs. They're great indicators. They were created at one time, and because at the time we were working in a channel, right? And it was an easy way to be able to communicate to senior leadership in a company. So here's a number. I put in these dollars, and here's my return on ad spend. Here's my total advertising cost. Here's what I'm getting. So it's an easy metric to understand.
Right.
Did anybody get bonused on ROAS? Does your stock price have anything to do with that? Absolutely not.
Doesn't appear in any annual reports.
Yeah. What we care about, top line revenue, profitable share growth. Just like any other, we're looking when we're in store anywhere else. That's what matters. All the other metrics are absolutely important to understanding, am I tracking in the right direction to achieve those goals of growth and share growth? And then the new metrics, the new hot word that is, so last year the word was AI. Right? This year the word is incrementality. And so that is, everybody's giving their own definition. I'll give you mine in a sec. But the two things we really like to look at beyond the share growth and the sales are incrementality and new to brand. Are we, so from a definition standpoint, incrementality, the way we define it and look at it is, are we getting a transaction or sale that I didn't get yesterday because I ran the media? Right. Now that could come from more frequency of use. It could be from a larger basket. It could be a new to brand. There's lots of ways that can be defined. And so that also gets into like when I'm doing media, how do I target those individual groups and how do I drive that? They're not all equal. And we can do all at the same time. New to brand is all about, are we bringing new shoppers in? Am I stealing from my competitor? Am I bringing somebody into the category altogether? Like these these better for you drinks right now that are out there, that's a whole new category that's stealing and bringing all sorts of new shoppers in. From an incrementality standpoint, it's not just defining who these audiences, how am I bringing them in and what's more transaction. It's also about how do I optimize my media in real time to get incrementality. So with our platform, we leverage a data and the algorithm that helps us optimize daily against that. So we do it in two ways. One is through an overlay on our tech to help us understand incrementality, but we also do it in the planning stage. And I can't emphasize this enough for everybody, is that media mix modeling is what I believe is where they need to be focused. Media mix modeling takes in all your sales data and your media data to understand where should my next best dollar go by retailer and by onsite or offsite. So, because now typically, so I'm sure I can hear fingernails on boards of people listening right now, that when you hear MMM, most people think of these huge projects. I go back in time, like when they finish the project and do the research, they hand over a phone book to you, like, here's the result. Today, it's all digital, it's algorithm based. As fast as we get data back from retailers and data back from the media, we can optimize it again and again as frequent as we want. We can do it weekly. And that allows us to do a couple things. One, optimize spends. How should I be moving dollars from retailer X to retailer Y? Should I be spending more on site, or should I be taking stuff off site? Because our job is not to spend $100,000 on Walmart. So a client comes in, I got $100,000 to win on Walmart. They said win, not spend. And so now Walmart wants, if you read the trade, they want 25% more money right now.
Yes.
And so they want 100% of your dollars there.
Right.
But the media mix modeling will show you, is there a more effective way to get that spend, to get the share you're looking for? Should I be using Meta or TikTok? What impact will it have? So all of this allows us to do predictive analytics to understand. So everybody can go to their leadership and say, look, here's different models. And we can run those MMM models against share, new to brand, profitability. And we can run those concurrently and say, okay, here's the different scenarios. If we want to spend more money, what happens? If I spend less, what happens? And so now we can make decisions very wisely before we start spending money. And so then we can act in confidence about moving forward. So that's why we think it's really, really important for the MMM. And then as we're doing that, because we can do that with frequency, it's another tool for incrementality to understand which one drove it.
So it feels like the traditional way that marketers measure success, which is certain KPIs, is you're a little outdated, and incrementality and where I spend a dollar most effectively should perhaps maybe where their focus should evolve to, instead of just some of the more traditional marketing.
Yeah, I think those are KPIs, right? So think, what I get bonus, I'm here to drive the business. Yeah. And the metrics now are about, driving the business is incrementality. Like I started my business, I started in the industry 25 years ago working for Miller Brewing Company, and everything was about how do I get one more beer in somebody's town, one at a time. So it's the same thing. It doesn't matter what we're selling.
How we do is different, but what we're ultimately trying to do.
Back then, I put it in your hand physically.
Well, along those lines, retail media networks have been one of the fastest growing aspects of retailing in recent years for the retailer as well as for the brand marketer, and a significant amount of brand marketing dollars now flow into these networks. You kind of touched on this a little bit, but I want to take maybe a level deeper. How do you advise your clients to spend most effectively both across retail partners and within a specific retailer? Because it feels like that's a little bit more complex now, to your point earlier, than it's been in the past.
Well, let me simplify things pretty fast. First off, top 5 retailers: Walmart, Amazon, Instacart, Target, and Kroger represent more than 90% of all retail media spend. So that also—
Is that a good or bad thing, by the way?
It makes things a little bit easier. I don't think it's a good thing. Well, first off, it's already complicated.
Yeah.
So now there's 250 other retail media platforms.
That's why I asked the question. Yeah.
So now, but they're all fighting over 10%, right? And so I don't think it's sustainable. There are partners out there, companies like Cody and a couple others who are, and Criteo, they're trying to unify a platform for them. Because it costs so much to maintain the technology to do that. They are completely upside down. Right. So they're going to have to get into a situation where they're in a group where it's easier to access. And if they can do that, then it makes sense for brands because it's easier to get to them. If I have to work within 30 different platforms, it's just not feasible. There's not enough hands-on keys, enough focus. A couple of very large CPGs I've talked with and basically told me, I think I'm going to focus on top 6 and just forget everybody else. It's just too hard. I don't have the resources to do it. And as much as an agency said, well, we can do that for you, still that's costly. It adds cost to it. And there's just the capability. So that's the other issue. Amazon and Walmart and Instacart are light years ahead of the other 200, right? And so now, even though there's retailer Y, mid-market guy has a platform, he doesn't have enough capabilities. He only can do some basic things on search. They're not connected to some of the off-site platforms. They don't have DSP built in. Or they're not connected with Trade Desk or with TikTok to understand, do I have attribution coming back? Do I know where these sales are coming from? So then they become less attractive but to become more attractive, you got to spend more on the tech to get it in there. And so they're in a very tricky place to become more valuable. And so I'm very interested. I think there's going to be some consolidation over the next couple of years.
And the merchant in me thinks about the fact that while I can see the argument that they're making on focusing on those top networks, in particular product categories, in particular consumer segments, in particular geographies, there are regional or specialty players that in that market or in that business or serving that particular customer, they are top at what they do, even though they don't have the footprint of an Amazon. And so it feels like to have, and I get why they're saying what they're saying if they're advertisers, but there's a whole lot of customers that they're not going to reach with a strategy like that.
Right. And those are audiences. Yeah. I think in terms of, so again, it gets to who's making the decision. Is it the customer team? They only care about their retailer.
Yes.
Right. The brand or the CMO cares about all of us. So that's the conversation has to be held at that level.
Yeah.
And so, but the problem is then we're really bad in this industry. It's gotten better with the media side of it, but like we're really bad at like, oh, you're on the brand team. You don't understand retail. So there's no credibility, right? You don't, and they don't. Yeah, it's not a ding. It's just, they have a different expertise than what the people here do. Right. But to get the spin you need, you have to make the argument and do the compelling argument with them. So again, I go back to M&M. What's the cost of a share point? So maybe, because right now it's more competitive on Walmart and Amazon, right? It costs more. The media's going up in price. And maybe these other retailers, here's a less expensive way to find some audiences. So this kind of goes, because it makes me think of election maps. What's my path to win? How do I, and it's not just, I got to win Texas and California. It's more complex. It's more complex. There's a lot of other small places of ways to get there. And if you can find that path for you or find that sweet spot or find the retailer. We have a client who just launched a beverage brand, and they're very focused on a lot of these smaller retailers. It's so fresh time and like specs and text, and they're having a lot of success being very focused. The other players aren't there.
Got it.
Right. So it gives them an upside to compete.
Makes sense. One of the things you talked about earlier or touched on a little bit was the role of AI. And I'm curious, what role does AI play in helping you and your clients kind of optimize their spend and enhancing the performance of their spend over the course of time?
Yeah. So AI. So the buzzword last year is still a buzzword, and still people throw it around and have no idea what they're talking about.
Yes, I saw. I've said that's part of why I asked the question.
So, our take, the way we look at AI, because we do talk a lot about AI. We have a platform called Daisy with AI right in the middle, but it's not about some brand new code and how we're reimagining the world, right? It's how AI, the best use of it today is, how do I make sense of volume of data? How can I look at all this volume that before took an analyst weeks manually doing in some spreadsheet, to now it can crank it out in seconds or minutes to be able to say, here are some great insights or indicators of what's going on. So I'd rather have my staff, your staff, be focused on strategic thinking than running reports. So if AI can help us streamline and automate reports, and so we have our humans still making the hard job, decision making, based on those insights. It's about speed. How can I get to volume of speed to do things? Right? And then now there's also what I love where AI is content. So go back to PDP. I need to write a PDP page. I can direct it with content and it will crank it out for us. And, again, it's not going to be 100%. AI's job is to get you on the path. Right? It's going to look at a lot of content out there. It's only good as where you point it to or what content you give it.
Right.
But if you do that, then you're going to cut your time down by 80, 90%. And you can spend the fine-tuning time to get it exactly the way you want it to be versus starting from zero.
Right.
The same thing with creative, video. We just came back from e-tail. We just saw a company make unbelievable strides in video for streaming TV. And so many brands, it's the other thing we try to tell our clients. In today's world, especially with the data like Scintilla and AMC, like streaming TV is accessible to any brand now. Anybody can be on TV, but it's about, do you have the content?
Right.
Right. And so now there is a platform we just witnessed that built an entire spot for apparel with unique users, unique clothes. And then as certain offers go away or talent goes away or things go out of stock, the products change automatically. And you cannot tell it's AI. Now, again, it's not a Super Bowl commercial, but it's doing the job you need it to do to create that awareness, to get the traction you want. Right. So I think, look, it's speed, it's optimization, it's creative.
Okay. So that brings me to the last question. And hopefully this kind of ties the bow on some of the things we've been talking about. I imagine that you see a number of brands doing things well and others that are doing things poorly in how they manage their digital spend these days. Are there any kind of recurring themes or advice that you as a marketer would give that kind of helps them address some of the common missed opportunities or mistakes that you see kind of on an ongoing basis?
So this isn't the sexiest answer, but boring wins. And what I mean by that is the basics win. Get your PDP right.
Yeah.
Take care of the demand gen of the audiences who are coming on the site. Let's do the sponsored product and sponsored brand. Let's capture those who are here first.
Yes.
Let's do the basics brilliantly. Second thing is, let's try. So like, again, go back to the data. What does the audiences tell me? Where should I be going? What tools should I be doing? It's not an all in. How do we try? And the third thing is, how do we fail fast? Right? That's the name of this game. So there's a lot, you would know this, like especially early days of e-commerce and media, there was a lot of set it and forget it.
Yes. And those days feel like they're gone.
And they're totally gone.
Yes.
And it did work then because there wasn't competition and like you didn't have as much and there's the only place that it was working.
Right.
Now you have to learn very quickly. Is it working or not? Can I pull the dollars? Do I reallocate somewhere else? What is the data telling me where I should go? So it's those three things. Do the basics brilliantly. So boring wins. Fail fast and try a lot.
That makes perfect sense. And I think that's great advice. And that's the thing, part of why I was excited to have you join us is it feels like so many marketers and so many brands, particularly smaller ones that you really focus on helping, they need that guidance. They need that advice. They need to hear the tough love conversations about this shiny object that you're being sold by others is not the solution. Here's how to advance your brand and drive sales the most effective ways, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Shaun, thank you so much for joining us. It feels like digital marketing broadly and the technology that underpins it is advancing at an unbelievable pace, and that yesterday's best practice would seem to be becoming obsolete at a blistering pace. Brands alongside their retail partners have to continually, it feels like, revisit their approach, where they spend, how they deploy their assets most effectively to drive the business. And this has been a great conversation. Thanks.
I appreciate the chance to be here. Enjoyed the conversation.
All right. So it's exciting to learn from market leaders like Shaun and from his team at BirdDog on the most effective ways to derive results through digital marketing. And conversations like this tell us that it's not a one-size-fits-all. It is very much a dynamic challenge and a dynamic marketplace out there. You really got to stay on top of it. So I was glad we had this conversation today. And so for the Digital Front Door, I'm Scott Benedict. Thanks for joining us.